So, hi, thank you very much for getting up early and actually making it to the first session after the big party last night. I really appreciate that. I'm here with Scott Totman, Vice President of Capital One in charge of mobile and innovation. Very cool title. And actually, that's actually a real title at Capital One, mobile and innovation. So they actually have people working diligently behind the scenes to make sure they're on the cutting edge of consumer tech. Who'd have thought that a big bank would actually have that title, but here he is, live and in person. And we also have Pete Varvarezis, who is lead developer for Amazon, or for Android, and also does a lot of architecture work for Capital One. And we're really lucky because today, these guys are going to take us through the journey that Capital One went on as they developed their Alexa skill. And it's really interesting. It's about how they kind of found the customer need, how they kind of experimented with it, how they decided to work the voice interactions and the voice interaction model. It's a really good story. But before we get started with the story, I'm going to quickly bring the audience kind of up to speed about Alexa and Echo. I know from our earlier poll, about half of you have an Echo at home. The rest of you don't. And you may be wondering, what's the difference or the fine line between this whole Alexa and Echo thing? So here it is, really simply. Alexa is a voice service that lives in the cloud. It's great, it can tell jokes, and it's on mute, thank you very much. Because if I talk about her without putting her on mute, it gets her to be a really interesting presentation. Obviously, she tells jokes, she knows a lot of funny stories, she can quote Monty Python. And Echo is one of several hardware endpoints through which you can access the Alexa voice service. So the Echo is just one piece of hardware that runs Alexa, but you also can do it on Fire TV. You can also do it on a Raspberry Pi. And one of my very favorite implementations is actually AVS, Alexa voice services, in a teddy bear. No, this is cool. Imagine you've got a toddler at home who can't read yet, but you want to send your toddler an email. Okay, good luck on that one, right? But what if they pick up this bear, they hug the bear, and the bear says, are you Johnny or are you Sally? I'm Johnny. Johnny, your mom has sent you a message. I'm going to be home late today. Please do everything your dad says. I'll see you at 7. Love, Mom. How cool is that? Being able to send your pre-reading toddler an email that can be read through a teddy bear using Alexa. So Alexa is an incredibly great service, and Echo is just one of the endpoints available for that. Now, Alexa comes with some really great skills turned on out of the box. For example, you can ask questions and get answers from Wikipedia, listen to TuneIn Radio, Pandora, iHeartRadio, including all of the music you've got on Amazon, including all of the Amazon Prime channels we listened to earlier. Sorry about that if you're not a fan of George Winston. You can also listen to Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, and you can even listen to your books from Audible. These are all skills that are enabled by default when you get your Echo home and out of the box. Other things that are really cool you can do with Alexa when you get it out of the box is control the lighting in your home. By being connected with these products here, you can actually do a really good job of voice automating certain appliances and lights in your house. Pretty neat for out-of-the-box functionality. So how does that functionality work? Well, we're going to take a look at an endpoint, an Echo. By the way, if you guys don't have one at home, this little obelisk-looking thing, this round thing is an Echo. I'll show you how that works. We've got the hardware, and then we've got Alexa services here in the cloud. What happens is when you ask Alexa a question, it streams the audio to the Alexa service in the cloud. The Alexa service in the cloud answers whatever question it can, looks up the Monty Python quote or what have you, and goes ahead and sends a response back to be turned into voice by Echo here. Not only will it send a vocal response, it also can send a response to be generated as a graphic interface through the Alexa app that you can put on your smartphone. This is really handy, particularly if you've asked Alexa a question, you got an answer, and then you find that you're not actually within speaking distance of Alexa anymore. You've asked for what the traffic is, you're halfway out of your driveway. You can actually go ahead and look up the answer she gave you on your app. on your smartphone. So this is a really great way that the information that Alexa can give you goes actually farther than just the range of the device itself. So think about that when you guys are building your own skills for this. And actually, that's one of the way Alexa always learns. The more you use it, the more it will learn your accent, the way you speak, your vocabulary. So it gets easier to interact with Alexa the more you use it. But it also gets smarter because it can learn new skills. Yes, Monty Python quotes are a skill that it knows, but what really makes it powerful is because you guys can teach Alexa new skills. So if you want it to do something that you haven't seen yet today, go ahead and write something for it. And this is how that looks. There are two parts to building your own Alexa skill. One, you're going to tell one of our servers, you're going to tell an Amazon developer portal about the skill that you've written so that when somebody asks their device or their Alexa service-enabled device to do something like give you a horoscope, it'll know to go and ping your server, which is the second part of the skill. This is what the architecture for that looks like. You still have the Echo, you still have the Amazon Alexa service, but we also have the developer portal where your service, this box right here, is going to register with the developer portal, and it will register something like, get me a horoscope. Now, you have to register with a service, so get me a horoscope takes the user to your skill and not to somebody else's skill. So there is potentially a little bit of a land grab there, so don't waste any time in actually registering your own skill on the portal. It's important to go ahead and get that now. But once you've registered your skill, the Amazon Developer Portal will send information about your skill and your server off to the Amazon Alexa service. Then, when the user asks their Echo, please get me my horoscope for Aries today, that request goes to the Alexa server and then goes straight to your service, where your service, in this example, would send the response about what my horoscope is back to the Amazon Alexa service, which will then send 1, the voice response, and 2, the GUI card, the graphic user interface card, off to the Amazon Alexa app. So that's how your skills help make Alexa smarter. Now, what are we talking about when we're talking about building a skill? A skill for Alexa is rooted in how you want a conversation to go with your user. So there is a schema for this. It's all in JSON, so it's really easy to understand. And we call the kind of the map of the conversation you're going to have with your customer, we call that a schema. And in this example up here, there are two things I want to be able to do, two conversations I want to have with my user, creating or getting a horoscope and getting lucky numbers. So in terms of our conversation, these are intents. These are intents that I want to have with my user. So get horoscope is one intent that I've put in my schema. It's not going to be terribly useful until you give me your sign, though, is it? So I need to get an argument for that. We have a place for that argument to go. It's called a slot. So every intent is going to have a slot to gather all of the arguments or variables you need to deliver the horoscope. Get lucky numbers. Notice its slot is empty. We don't really need anything from the user to get a lucky number. But we certainly do need a sign and the date for which you want your horoscope if we're going to deliver a horoscope. Now, think of all the different ways that the person you're having a conversation with could ask for a horoscope. They could say, what's the horoscope for Aries? What is my horoscope? Give me my horoscope. Tell me my horoscope. All of the different ways that a user could possibly ask for that are almost limitless. Alexa does a great job of figuring out quite a lot of them. But if you want to put down common ways or perhaps unusual or unique ways that someone might interact with your particular service, you're going to build something called a list of utterances. I know, utterances is kind of an awkward term, but utterances is simply things that the user could say that you want to be interpreted in a very specific way and assigned to a certain variable, which is great, because you can have variables that are numbers, numbers that are dates. You can even do literals, where the words the user has spoken show up directly as JSON text to your service. So using the schema, the intent schema, and the slots inside the intents and the utterances, Capital One had a good time starting to build their voice interaction model for the Capital One service. At this point, I would like to give the control to Scott, and he can finish taking you on that journey.
Our journey here started with, for me, with my 7-year-old. So I had gotten an Echo in June, the invite only, where you wait a couple months for it. And I took it into the house and I plugged it in, at which point my son proceeded to ask Alexa to tell him a joke about 5,000 times. And between that and the Congos and Maroon 5, that was pretty much his world with Echo for a while. I was listening to music and asking for jokes. But it got me thinking, like, what else could we make the Echo do? And my son doesn't really understand money. Like, I'm a bank, my credit card is all we need, and that's basically where money starts and ends with him. So I started thinking around, like, wouldn't it be cool if he could check on his savings account? So when grandma sends him a check for his birthday, it doesn't just go off in the ether. He can actually ask Alexa, what's my balance, and see that he has more money now because grandma sent him a check. So that's what I started thinking about. And I went and talked to some developers at work, and it turns out that they were thinking about this as well. They had already kicked off an internal hackathon, done some proofs of concept, but really just kind of canned demos. So what we did is in July, I grabbed everyone who had been looking at this and just threw them in a room and said, hey, let's get something working for real. So the demos are really easy with an Echo, where you can make it sound really elegant and give almost like these prophetic type responses and make it look like it's really sophisticated, but in the end it's not doing anything. So I wanted to focus on building something for real. And what was the smallest unit of meaningful information we could send back to the user, which in this case was, let's just get their credit card balance back. And once we did that, it would open up kind of a lot of other opportunities for us to make Alexa do more, but we wanted to start there. And then in parallel, there was a business group that had gone off and kicked off some user research. So we use design thinking at Capital One. For those who aren't familiar with design thinking, it's user empathy-based product research. So talk to the user about an experience with a product, listen for friction points, listen for needs that aren't being met, and then try to craft your product to address those needs and reduce those friction points. So that went off in parallel. And what came back from the user research is customers like it. So the idea of hands-free convenience is really nice. They're interested in using the Echo for informational purposes. So for Capital One, we call that like read-only, where you're asking a question and you get an answer back. But you're not really moving money or anything. And then they're open to making payments, moving money, and doing transactions. But they had some concerns about local security. So if you're in a household that has multiple people, especially roommates, what happens when Bob wants to pay himself with your account and make rent? So we had to work through things like that. And then users are kind of funny with their financial credentials. They don't they don't trust third parties, not just Amazon, but Apple, Google, you name it. They're really used to interacting on our properties and within our products with their credentials. So getting them over that security concern and that hurdle was something we wanted to focus on as well. So while that was taking place, the prototyping we kicked off, we were able to leverage some technologies we already had in-house. So for those who got to hear Rob Alexander give a keynote a couple of days ago, about 3 years ago, we really focused on technology at Capital One, and we went through all our back-end systems and converted them over to start using nice RESTful APIs. That doesn't sound very novel for any startup, but for a large company to go back, that's a very, very heavy lift. But that's what enabled us to go build our native mobile apps and really unlock all the back-end systems is through those APIs. We'd also just gotten done with our first wearable supporting Apple Watch, where they have these glance features. Again, these read-only features where you can check your balance, look at your last transaction. And those two things really set up the foundation for what we needed to do to get Alexa working. And really all that was needed was building this new Node.js service. And we used a library. Thank you, Matt Cruz. He built the Alexa app node library. I'll tell you why that was extremely valuable to us, but it saved us a lot of time. And within about a week and a half, we actually got Alexa to be able to give you your real credit card balance. We had to solve some authentication concerns, some security concerns, and some token with a TTL that wouldn't expire too early on us. And I'll walk through that a little bit as well. So once we got that working, we realized the only real limit to what Alexa could do was the limit of our APIs within the company. So once you get that core plumbing in place, Now we could focus on what do users want and what should we prioritize for our product development going forward. And so what we looked at first is on the left, again, the read-only information. Balances, when is my bill due, when was my last payment, what are my recent transactions, and then focusing on the money movement, so paying bill, money transfers, and we'll walk through a demo of that as well. And then at the end, experimenting, so app usage patterns, how are people interacting with it, how can we learn what they want to do. Account linking wasn't in place when we started working on it, but now that it is, we want to go back and revisit OAuth and see if that's a solution for getting users to link their accounts with Echo. Listening to the customer service reps. So people are calling in to Capital One daily, asking questions. We want to help use that to hopefully make this more convenient than a call center for getting their questions answered. And can we use this as a customer acquisition tool? So before you have a Capital One relationship, is there some value we can provide, whether it's home loan rates, promotions for cards, what have you, something that makes it valuable to have this as a skill, even if you're not a Capital One customer yet. And of course, we want to watch Alexa adoption and see what Amazon does with the Alexa evolution and make sure we're keeping up with everything there. And what helped with this, if you're working on this, at Capital One, it's a large company, we spend time kind of going on a road show to get support for this so that we can invest in it more and more. So we had a skill, Capital One, that was sort of our production skill. I didn't want Pete writing code while I was trying to give a demo to somebody and having to wait for a half an hour. So we created Capital One, Capital Two, and Capital Three, which is basically our dev, QA, and prod environments. So Pete could be working on Capital Two, but I was confident that Capital One would still be working. So that was extremely valuable. I'd encourage you, if you're going through this similar kind of path, to have that set up as well. With this, I was going to hand it over to Pete to walk us through the first half of the demo, and then some lessons learned that came out of that, especially around the technology challenges, and then walk through a back half of the demo as well.
Thank you, Scott. So again, we're just going to, like any other skill for the Echo and for Alexa, you start by asking her to open it or to launch it. So Alexa, open Capital One.
Welcome back. How can I help?
What's my current balance?
You have $264.87 in your 360 checking account.
When's my bill due?
Your Visa business account bill is due on October 6th.
Hey, Pete, ask the volume to go to 9 or 10.
Alexa, volume 9.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Alexa, volume 9. Alexa, open Capital One and pay my bill.
Select your payment account. 1. 360 checking account ending in 0758. 2. Checking account ending in 4418.
2.
How much would you like to pay?
$50?
You want to pay $50 to your Visa business account using your checking account. Is this correct?
Yes.
Your payment has been scheduled. What's next?
List my transactions.
You have met your minimum payment for your Visa business account.
Sometimes computers don't listen to me. List my transactions.
Here are your recent transactions for your Visa business account. A transaction of $1,971.64.
Alexa.
Hotel Casino.
Alexa.
Purchase of
Alexa.
$268.31 at the Grand Lux Cafe.
Cancel.
Okay, but you didn't have to yell.
All right.
Very nice.
Okay, now,
Thank you.
so just a little bit behind the scenes. I have a copy of the skill that they wrote that I've been looking at Amazon. We've been practicing the demo and stuff, and I've got the list of utterances. The list of utterances he first sent me did not equate bucks to dollars. So at some point, you decided that a customer would pay $50 or something. So you added that, and okay, very, very clever. It took me by surprise on that one. But that's an example of an utterance that you would put into that utterance list so that it would know how to handle that, right?
Yeah, really the problem comes down to finding out how people are going to interact with things, and engineers don't really interact with people. So it's a little harder to pick those out when you're just looking at it, but hearing it come back, and I believe we have a couple things on this as we move forward. So.
Oh, this is good. Okay.
And we need to talk about your expense report by the time we get back to the office as well. So again, the value of doing this for real. So everything in that was real, with one exception. When we scheduled the payment, we don't actually connect that API up, because as often as we're testing these things, it would be a mess. So that's one that we left off, but everything else was real. And we're actually going to show you how we unlink his account and link my account real time, and what we walk through there. So a couple things we learned doing this. Numerical utterances. So if anybody, who's working with utterance examples currently for their Alexa skill? Okay, a few people. We ran into some hurdles there that hopefully we can help you guys overcome. Latency is a lot different in a world that does not have UI. So we walk you through some of that. And then obviously security. So the challenge with numbers, 22 is hard to turn into 22 instead of 20 and 2. So some people also say 354 versus 354. So sometimes we're just catching the back half of that and getting, or sorry, 44. Sometimes we're just catching the 44. And then there are optional words like 100 and cents. So the solution was programmatically creating a big list. So we've got about 712 now. I think we're over 750 at this point. Over up to 900. So
with bucks, of course.
With bucks,
Yeah.
yes. That was my suggestion, so thank you for that. The Alexa app node service that Matt provides actually was very helpful for this. I was talking with someone before the session today. What we do is we create a template, and at runtime, Matt's library explodes that out into basically every variation of that utterance example that he can determine. We pipe that out to the console, literally copy and paste that into the utterance examples, and we use that to build out our utterance list, and that saved us a whole lot of time. Support for optional words, so use the syntax in there that allows users to either add the word and or not. And then ideally, at some point down the road, having support for the currency data type would eliminate a lot of the needs for what we're doing currently. And because this presentation is a week old, it's woefully outdated, because last week, Amazon announced support for custom slot types. We did not get a chance to switch everything over to that, but we think that that's going to reduce about 80% of our utterance examples. So if you haven't looked at the custom slot types, please go focus on those. They will save you a lot of time. Here's an example of what we've currently got. And again, this is the output of Matt Cruz's library. And you can see in here, there's a difference between 1,000 versus 21,000 versus 8,000. Places where people put and then places where people put cents at the end. So this is just an example, again, out of 712 items we had in the list before of things that you have to take into account. So the other thing we ran into is latency challenges. So in a former job, I spent about 5 years doing accessibility work, and I think that's probably the single most valuable experience I had in building UI for people, regardless of whether or not they were blind or had low vision, because it forces you to, once you eliminate the UI, all you have is that sound coming back. And when there's latency, you don't have a spinner, you don't have a progress bar, you don't have images slowly coming in, you just have silence. And so we had to solve for that. And I think the patience threshold is a lot lower when users are trying to have a conversation with a machine versus sitting there watching it load. So the solution, one of which is kind of the Captain Obvious example, but keep your APIs fast. I would set your benchmark to the skills that come with it that are pre-built in. So your weather, your sports, jokes, like that's your benchmark. That's the expectation of the customer, and anything that's longer than that is again gonna test their patience. Leveraging the Alexa session data. So in every request, we take the session object and we copy it directly back to the response object. What that allows us to do is cache data that we don't have to persist, and that helps us avoid additional API call lookups and short circuit a lot of things that would otherwise take a long time. So leverage the session data. We're probably abusing it, but it's okay because that's what it's there for. Put your data in there and then keep it running through the requests and responses. And then keep your explanations of your responses terse, but not rude. In the example of the transactions that Pete racked up last night, it's really easy at a glance to look at a page and parse out what you want to see about that transaction. But when you have to listen to it, it is a very linear conversation. The longer you take, again, the less patient the customer will get. And finally, security. So this is the biggest one for us and the biggest one for our customers. So like I said, account linking didn't exist as an available solution. So we had to figure out a way to solve, you're standing in your house, you have an Echo and you have a Capital One account. And as a customer, you're trying to figure out why don't they just know about each other. So we had to figure out how to connect those two. At the same time, while there's no guaranteed privacy on the Echo end, we had to try to solve for that as well. So the best we could do is come up with a scenario where the vulnerabilities of linking your account with your Echo could only be compromised if your actual overall account was compromised. So it's kind of hard to explain, but basically, if your Echo gets compromised, your account already was, and the least of your problems is your Echo. You have an account that's compromised, and people are probably trying to move money out. So that was like make it a subset or a lower threshold than that, and that was our solution there. We used a pairing code. We'll walk you through that. And then for money movement, we're not satisfied with what we have for the read-only calls. So read-only calls, getting your balance. We're okay with this level of authentication, but if you actually want to move money, we're working through things like a secret phrase or another PIN or something that actually helps us confirm that the user is in fact that user to enable that transaction. So this is what the pairing flow looks like for the first time, and then we'll give a quick demo of it. So the first time you open open the Capital One skill, it says, I don't know who you are. Here's a PIN. You log into the Capital One app, you provide that PIN, and you hit pair, and you're off to the races. So what we did is we built a one-off version of our mobile app that's in the market today, and just added an Echo preference. So Pete, actually, do you want to log in? Well, I will unpair and repair. Actually, I'll perfect line. Hang on a second. So this is another developer tool that's extremely helpful. In order to do the first-time user experience, you can only do it once, right, unless you completely reset the account. So we came up with this idea of unpairing, and we've actually found this valuable for scenarios where if you go on vacation, you don't want to worry about somebody else using Alexa while you're gone, you can just unpair your accounts and then repair them when you come back. So Alexa, ask Capital One to unpair.
You can unpair in the Bluetooth settings on your mobile device.
Alexa, open Capital One. Open Capital One.
What can I do for you today?
Unpair.
Thanks for using Capital One. Your accounts have been removed from Echo.
So what I'm doing now is logging into our custom-built Capital One app. There we go.
Excellent.
So this is the Capital One app. Go in here, and there's, under settings, we just added an Echo. So what I'm going to do now is, oops. Okay, this works better without the mic. Alexa, open Capital One.
I'm not sure who you are. Use your Capital One app to link Echo to your account. Your unique code is 29151.
So then I hit pair and submit.
You can. So every time that you would open the Capital One app, it would reprompt you with that PIN because it knows that you're not paired still.
Right.
In addition, and I can show you this from, we also send down a card into the Alexa app as well on your device. So if you happen to not be near your phone to actually do it, but we actually, as you can see here, we send down the unique token. Zoom in a little. So the unique tokens also send into the Alexa app on your devices as well. So you don't need to ask it to relaunch.
And so now if I go open Capital One, it should be completely different. Alexa, open Capital One.
What can I do for you today?
What's my credit card balance?
You owe $1,665.35 on your Quicksilver account.
And we don't need to walk through my transactions.
Doesn't go both ways, does it?
And so that was live. We linked over to mine, and everything was working. That was really cool. And the unpairing has proved to be very, very valuable for us as well. One thing subtle in the...
switch from wolf vision.
Whoops, thank you. So one thing subtle that was taking place while we were doing this was, it wasn't showing up here, sorry. There we go. Was implicit context switching. So if you're on our website and you're going between your checking account and your credit card, you're explicitly selecting it in the drop-down and going over to another account and performing those transactions. When a customer is having a conversation with your product, they're doing a lot of implicit context switches. So there's a bad engineering joke where an engineer goes to the grocery store and the spouse asks him to get a loaf of bread, and if there are eggs, get a dozen. So the engineer comes back with a dozen loaves of bread. And it's like, why do you have a dozen loaves of bread? It's like, well, you said get a loaf of bread, and if there are eggs, get a dozen. So I got a dozen loaves of bread. And the thing is, there was an implicit shift over to eggs that the engineer did not appreciate. And so Pete and I actually had some fun arguments where I'd be in my savings account and it'd say, pay my credit card bill. And it says, you can't do that. And I'd be like, Pete, why can't I do that? And he's like, well, you're in your savings account. I was like, but I just said pay my credit card account. And there's enough information in the statement from the customer to know that there's an implicit context switch from the savings account over to the credit card account. So, switching context, keep an eye out for that, and just overall recognizing what the user intent there. Map out your workflows, map out your conversations with your customers, and understand where those opportunities are for the customer to completely shift context on you without you expecting it. And then when in doubt, if you can't figure out, like if there are 2 credit card accounts and you go to pay your credit card bill, just ask the user. In our example of paying the bill, there were 2 checking accounts that could pay the credit card bill, so you just ask, you want this one or you want this one? It's better than, you never really want to get to a state where you just say, I don't know what you're trying to do, and then give up. Here's a code sample of context switching. It's nothing that complicated, but basically, checking to see, is the current account the credit card account? Once we figure out that's what the user wanted to do, and if it's not, then go ahead and switch over to that credit card account. And if there's only one, just do it. If there's more than one, we're going to wind up asking the user. So takeaways. Overall, the Alexa is really, really easy to work with. We didn't know this going in, but we quickly learned that the majority of the effort is really on us trying to figure out how to have a conversation with our customer, not trying to get it working. So again, I would expect most of your time to be building out your utterance examples, building out your conversation flows, and how that's going to work. Additionally, the ask overall is evolving really quickly. So some of the things that we've needed got announced last week, and they're looking to us and to developers like you to help them prioritize their roadmap. So there's pretty much not a single thing that I've wanted that's not on their radar, but it's a matter of what comes first and what are the most important skill evolutions that are going to be coming. So for the wish list, skill discoverability, I think, is a challenge. Right now, a user has to go into the companion app, the Alexa app, explicitly enable the skill before using it. And we're not sure that that's going to be the most discoverable way to do it. And so, Pete, you actually have a demo of, on the Android at least, we can detect, if you're a Capital One customer, when we launch the app, we can see that you've installed Alexa, and we can actually come up and give a nice experience where not only do we know you're a customer, but we know you've installed Alexa, and just ask you, or at least inform you, that you can use Capital One on your Echo. And
here's the example of that. So I'm going to, again, go into our beta app. And it's not the beta. We're actually on the alpha. So we have multiple versions everywhere. So when we launch the alpha app, you'll notice that it comes up and it says, hey, did you know you can get Capital One on your Amazon Echo? And it gives you the option to go directly into the Alexa app. And unfortunately, we can't get to the skills tab, but we give them that information in that previous screen. So a user who has recently downloaded the Alexa app will get that prompt the next time they launch our app. And then obviously don't keep prompting them. But
yep. And in addition to that, we think it would be great too, this is a challenge I know for Amazon, but for all the skills, if if Alexa knew, even if you haven't enabled the skill, say open Capital One, it could at least tell you like, hey, please go into the Alexa app and enable this skill, or do something where I think a lot of people are going to discover these skills by word of mouth. I somehow found out that cat fax is like this crazy popular skill, but I certainly didn't go into the Alexa app to find it myself. I just heard it in the office, and I'd like to just come in and start using it. So that's one. Another one is handling vocal interruptions better. So as we're reading out recent transactions, for example, it would be nice to just say stop, but right now you have to say Alexa stop, and it's a little bit difficult to interrupt sometimes when you have a large stream of data coming back. So we'd like that. And then a notification indicator. The easy answer here would be allow developers to just send push notifications to an Echo. But at that point, we probably would have created the worst spam machine ever created, where it will just wake up in your house and start talking to you at random times, which would be horrible. But having some scenario where it's either opt-in or just a visual indicator to let you know, like, hey, if we think there's a fraud transaction on your card, it would be nice for us to be able to give you some sort of visual indicator, and then you wake the Echo up and ask for what the notifications are and interact with it that way. That'd be a nice item on the roadmap as well. Pete, any other?
Yeah, I actually got a really great one. So who here has a checking or savings account, just in general? Checking or savings?
Okay, who didn't raise their hand to that?
So how many of you call those deposit accounts?
Yeah.
Okay. The problem with working with utterances is knowing what your customers are going to say. You can't. So we were talking about deposit accounts internally. No one's going to say, "Get me my deposit account balances," unless they work at Capital One or they're an engineer. So it was understanding that you can't just use industry lingo. You have to understand what the user with an Echo or running Alexa will actually do and say to get them where they need to be. So just keep that in mind as you're building out how these interaction patterns, and just what is the user going to say? How are you going to understand what they want with the language that they're going to use with your app and in your context?
Yep.
Hey, Pete, I've got a question. When you're looking back at the amount of work it took you to get to this point, how much work was figuring out the conversation you wanted to have with the customer versus how much work was actually implementing an Alexa skill?
Building an API, it's a back-end service. The problem isn't getting data, it's always informing the user, showing the user that data. And when there's no visual cues and there's no UX designer to tell me what to do, I had to come up with a way to get that data to the user. So it is really literally 10% getting the data and 90% showing it. And it's even worse because, again, I'm an engineer. So I just had to say something that was wrong to know that, to have someone tell me that it was wrong and what should be right. But it's those little patterns, the dollars versus the bucks, the context switching, the implicit, if you only have, if we were to pay a bill and you only have one payment account, I'm not going to ask you to select it, just select it. Right. Things like that. So there's a lot of engineering stuff that when it's on a screen, when you have a very fast pipe, these things are easy to just push the user through. But when you think about it vocally, it's one of those, you don't have those context clues. You don't have that implicit visual to give the user to know where they're at, what they're doing. So help them along. When you're talking to someone, if you have to keep repeating, well, no, we were talking about this guy, or we were talking about this account, where did you go? It becomes more cumbersome, and at that point, they're probably not going to leverage your skill. They'll probably just pull up your app or pull up your website, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the quick interaction with the, hey, I'm watching TV, and oh, my bill's due, let me just pay it real quick.
Yeah. And I'd say finally on that note of having the conversation with your customers, when you miss, when all of your intents and utterance examples fail, it would be great to see what the user was trying to say. So that's how we learn, is we see a user ask a question, we couldn't handle it because it's a question we'd never heard before. We need a way to see those so that we can start adding in those utterance examples and add those to our intent schema down the road. And I know that's on the radar as well, but that's our story. And we went from basically a handful of engineers thinking about how could we get this working to a real project with a real budget that we're looking at very seriously, and it's been a lot of fun.
So the stuff that they've learned, thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, Pete.
Sure.
The stuff that they learned, a lot of this they learned the hard way through trial and error. What we've done is we've worked with Capital One and others who are building Alexa skills using the Alexa Skills Kit. And we've actually put together a package of best practices. Most of these I've actually pulled from resources that we have on our Amazon.com ASK website, developer.amazon.com/ASK. And it's all about recognizing this new model of user interface. For example, if I read this slide to you verbatim, if I did this for the whole presentation, you guys would be falling asleep and leaving out the door. You can process a lot more information visually more quickly than you can audibly. So recognize that if I actually tried reading this to you, that would be painful. You may have a great award-winning website, but close your eyes and have someone read it to you. How soon does that get really, really old? So keeping that in mind, look at some things that are frequent fails when you're trying to convert a website into an audio service. Sometimes you can give the user a bunch of information, but without a checkbox or a go button, it's not clear that the user has to do anything. Much better is to make an explicit question at the end of that list to let the user know that something's got to happen. So the best practice here is if you want the user to respond, ask them a question or tell them to pick one thing or another. Second thing, sometimes a user needs a little bit more help. For example, if we've got this app called Carfu and you just say, Alexa, open Carfu, and it's a Carfu. Okay, now what? Much better to actually give the user the context. Carfu, you can ask me to get a ride or these other things, and then that's great because then the user knows what they can ask for. Now, I really like this example because take a look at the bottom of the last Carfu response. You've asked for a ride, and what it does is it tells you exactly what's going to happen next. If it didn't tell you that there would be an alert on your mobile device when your ride was there, you'd kind of be left in alert as to what to do next, wouldn't you? So having your skill tell the customer, here's what I'm going to do with our transaction. Our conversation today has resulted in this, and this is how I'm going to let you know moving forward, is very important to kind of close the loop and finish the conversation with your user. So please remember to do that. Best practice, always remember you need to finish an interaction suggesting what the user can do and what the user can do next. I love presenting options clearly. Would you like French fries or a salad? Yes, I would. This comes directly from a website user interface where you know that there's a radio button there, right? There's a radio button option by salad, a radio button by French fries, and you got to pick one before you can go on, right? Well, just translating that makes poor vocal UI. Much better if we go ahead and say, would you like French fries or a salad? Yes, no. Which side would you like, French fries or a salad? Another good way to solve this is pick a side. You can say French fries or salad. So those are good things. In other words, either or questions need to be stated explicitly. Otherwise, you might get, well, yes, I would. And what do you do with that? So help the user give you the context and give you the right answer by asking a very precise question. This is also fun. Keep it brief. This comes under the category of easy to process visual information versus audio information. I mean, I'm not even going to read that to you because I get tired reading that slide. So much better is to ask a shorter question. Get the horoscope for which sign. Now, imagine that you've got a skill and it gives you a horoscope. If it read this to you every single time you launched it, and you've got to wait 3 or 4 seconds for this to get read every time, it's going to get old launching that app. It's a lot easier to launch the app and work with the app when this is what it asks you when you open it. So remember, use fewer words than you probably do on your website. If you're in doubt, just have someone read it to you and see if it works while you're listening to it. Next, a voice. verbose word choices are great, again, visually because you can process the information, but sometimes you can go overboard in the other direction by asking, for chocolate, say chocolate, for vanilla, say vanilla. Seriously? Really? Are you going to make me listen to that? This is probably a lot easier. You can say chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry. Users can get that. Usually up to 3, maybe 4 things. So best practices don't represent more than 3 or 4 choices. Avoid repetitive wording, because if you don't, you're going to end up with this problem. And this problem, yeah, I'm not going to read that to you guys either. But if you've got a skill like Capital One's, and when you open Capital One, it read this laundry list of things you could do every time, yeah, you'd use it once, and then by the time, well, it finished the list, you'd forget what it said at first. So a much better interaction model is to take the 80% of the stuff your users are going to want to do most frequently. So 80% of the time a user comes to my app, they want to do one of these 3 things. Present those options. Present the rest of your options either in context, like Capital One's done a good job of doing, or let the user say help and get those additional bits of information. So that's our practice there. Make sure you're presenting what the most likely path is first, and let the user have a mechanism to go deeper to get more. Use the information that the customer's given you. Capital One gave you guys a great example of, pay my credit card bill. Would you like to pay your credit card bill? No, I want the weather. That's why I asked to pay my credit card bill. So if your skill is going to do one thing, like tell a joke, when they ask Alexa, launch Joke Bank, just go ahead and tell the joke. You've got everything you need from the user already. So make sure that you use the information that a user is giving you, make smart assumptions, and avoid asking those non-essential questions. All right, and finally, it's really important to make the user feel comfortable, let them know that they're in the right place by giving them that context. What account do you want to pay with? You can pay with your checking account. You can pay with your savings account. Present usable chunks of information, not endless lists that the user's going to have to try and parse. How painful would it be if those EULAs that we click through all the time were read to you? Your attorneys may want it to be read, but if you can suggest that those get taken care of when you actually enable the skill, that's one and done stuff. That's not something you want to interact with your user every time. So try and take care of that when you enable the skill, not every time or not even the first time the user launches. And then don't blame the user if something goes wrong. Remember, they're using natural language. They're using what feels right to them. And if it's a miss, maybe it's something you want to add to the utterances list. But they're using what seems right to them. And so remember, they're not wrong, and don't tell them, you're not using the correct utterance. That's not a good user feedback. So make sure that you're always helping the user feel good. Now, I'm not going to read this to you, but I do want you to take a picture of this. Get out your phones. I know I don't like you using your phones during the presentation, but this is good to take a picture of, just so that you have a reference. So before the slides are available online, you can go ahead and reference this quick list of best practices. And it's also a sneaky way of getting you to get your phones out so that you can take a picture of this slide, which is very important because it has a bunch of great resources and information on it I know you're going to want to go to before these slides are available online. Capital One, obviously, so you can set up your Capital One accounts and start using the skill as soon as it's public. And then developer.amazon.com ASK. No, that's not asking us something. That's the Alexa Skills Kit. And that's where you can drill down and get a lot more information about building a skill, including all of the nuts and bolts on how to get started. You can actually go here and you can learn how to build your first skill in about 30 minutes using a service with Amazon Lambda. It's really fun to do, and it's like 30 minutes. It's a good thing to do. Please remember to fill out your evaluations. That's an important thing as well. We can continue the conversation if you follow me on Twitter, Mike F. Hines. And last but certainly not least, when you scanned in at the door, all of you were entered into a drawing for really cool Amazon hardware. You could get an Amazon Fire tablet, you could get a Fire TV stick or Fire TV. You could also potentially win an Echo. All you need to do to find out if you've won is check this URL. Yeah, so if you've got your phones out, you can take a picture of this URL or just type it in right now. If your name shows up here, you guys go out to the lobby area out here at the end of the hall and go ahead and ask for the prize that you won. And congratulations, you've won. So hey, thank you very much for your time. We are certainly available for questions. I know a lot of questions are going to be probably a little more in-depth. The three of us will be available in the lounge by where you pick up your devices if you want to come over and have a more in-depth conversation with us and ask us a little bit more about how Capital One implemented this. So guys, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.